The 26-man roster is shaping up. Let's talk about it on Believe in Astros.
What's up, Astros fans?
This game is turned upside down!
Welcome to the Believe in Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros, with your host, sports writer and native Houstonian, Jeff Balke. Now, direct from H-Town, here's Jeff Balke.
What is up, Astros fans? Welcome to episode 107 of the Believe in Astros podcast on the Believe Podcasting Network. I'm Jeff Balke, flying solo today. I had promised a guest for today. Didn't quite work out, but I do have an announcement on that coming up shortly. Astros are starting Hunter Brown today after a very good start from Framber Valdez yesterday. Went 4 innings, gave up 1 run, and struck out 4. Love that for him. Actually, Framber's looked pretty good after that shaky start, and honestly, that's what we want. We want to see old Framber. We want to see Framber from last year when he was, throwing like tons of ground balls and getting all these quality starts racked up in a row. They're going to need that from him. I think this rotation is going to be an interesting one this season, just in terms of injuries. And, we're going to have guys coming back from injury. Hopefully we won't have too many injuries to starting rotation. We'll start with, obviously, Justin Verlander, who's going to be out until at least April 11th with his sort of, it's called shoulder strain or whatever. JP France is working to get back into the starting rotation. He could in time for opening day or until his start, because he'll probably be a 5th starter. So we'll see. Right now, and I'm going to talk about the 26-man roster here in just a little bit. But before I dive into that, I want to mention a story I read this morning on The Athletic about players in the year before free agency and how much it impacts their play on the field. Most specifically, how's it going to impact Alex Bregman? Still no new contract for him, scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent after this season. I don't want to call it a foregone conclusion, but I would say it's very likely that Alex Bregman is test free agency. And I'd say if he does test free agency, I'd say it's better than 50-50 that he is not with the Astros after that, which would be a bummer, obviously, and wouldn't be great for the Astros since they don't really have a viable candidate for third base waiting in the wings like they did with Jeremy Pena. But then again, they haven't really had a viable center fielder candidate when George Springer left, and they still managed to handle that pretty well. But still, it's going to be interesting. But in the article, they talk a little bit about if guys are better, in sort of a variety of different things. I did think, in a nutshell, basically they said typically players are a little bit better in their free agent seasons, and they tend to want to play more games. Now, Bregman played a full slate last year of games. It was the healthiest he'd been in a while. And I think he's that type of player anyway. And the Astros are going to need him to be, since they don't really have anybody to back up at third. But they also say they're a little more aggressive at the plate in terms of swinging, and they don't steal as often. So how does that break down specifically for Bregman? So my guess is he's going to have a good year. He's going to want to have a good year. Like I said, he played a full season in 2023 without any serious health issues. Looks like he's healthy this year again. He worked out, had a kind of crazy, but a very intense offseason workout regimen that he said really helped him a lot. That combo of health and the desire for a big payday, it's probably going to make him better, right? Barring some unforeseen injury or something like that. So, and he doesn't steal a ton, right? So it's not going to make a huge difference, I think, in steal numbers. Although they did find that steal numbers were pretty down for guys who were in their free agency season. And that doesn't really surprise me. I mean, these are guys that are going to try and protect their health in a season where they, are looking to get paid. And Bregman is one of the most reliable, if not the most reliable Astro when it comes to plate discipline. He does not swing at a lot of pitches out of the zone. And they had a stat or a series of stats in that that were like Z swings, zones through the swings through the zone, excuse me. And Bregman was about the same this spring as he is normally. I mean, it hasn't really changed very much. But I will say this. I do expect Bregman to swing with more urgency and more aggressiveness. Now, I don't necessarily think that's going to turn into like more wild swings and a higher strikeout rate. I just think Bregman, that's just not who he is. He's always going to swing at pitches in the zone, and I think that's kind of who he is, right? And he's not going to probably chase that much. But I do think we could see him be a little more aggressive with pitches that are in the zone. He had 25 home runs last year. If he's able to push that closer to or over 30, if he's able to have sort of a career year in home runs, it really does bode well for him as a player. I mean, let's be honest. Chicks dig the long ball, as they like to say. And I think with Alex Bregman, he's a guy, you hit more home runs. The reality is you're going to probably get more looks. I'm just pulling up his stats here. His best home run year was 41 in 2019. He hit 31 the year before that in 2018. Since then, last year was his best at 25. If he gets back into the 30s again, it's going to be really good for him. So I do think he will be a little more aggressive. I mean, I would be. Now, again, I think with him, you want that if you're an Astros fan, because he's not a guy that's going to be like hyper aggressive and swinging at stuff outside of the zone. That's just not Alex Bregman's MO. He's a very disciplined guy at the plate. But does it mean he'll be swinging harder and looking for greater lift on pitches that are in the zone? I could see that. So honestly, from a 2024 Astros standpoint, this is all good news, right? You want Alex Bregman being aggressive. You want him hitting home runs. You want him getting extra base hits. Look, he was at an 806 OPS last season. His career is in the 860s. You want his OPS up closer to 900. I mean, all of those things bode well. And right now, who cares about what happens in 2025? The Earth could be destroyed by an asteroid between now and then. We don't know. So right now, if you're living for the moment, you're like, hey, Alex Bregman, it's your free agent year. Go out there and show off. That's what I think you want. As a long-term Astros fan, as somebody who is concerned, you want him to have a great year because the potential rises then for the Astros to be a really good team, potentially win another World Series. But you're also tempering that with the feelings like, well, if he's really, really good, then maybe the Astros can't afford him, or maybe, he gets offered a crazy deal that the Astros just aren't willing to match. All those things are possible. All those things are on the table. But I think right now, you want to hope for a big season from him. You want to hope that his dollar signs increase, that the decimal points increase. You want to hope that there are more zeros for him at the end of this year than there were at the beginning of this year, because that means he had a great season. In his run-up MVP year, 41 homers. That's what you really want to see. Now, can he do that? I think he certainly can. He's a bit older now, but I do think he still has that in him. If I were going to make just projections right now, I think he hits 30 home runs. He had 25 last year, and he didn't have a particularly great year at the plate. He was okay. I think he goes 860, 870 OPS and probably hits 30 homers. And if he does that, that's just great for the Astros, because that Yordan's probably going to belt 30, assuming he stays healthy. Kyle Tucker's probably going to be up at, he was almost a 30-30 guy last year, so he's going to be up around the 30 range. Listen, I think Chas McCormick has a potential to get up close to 30 home runs, if he's playing more than he did last year. Yainer Diaz had more than 20 last year. He could be close to 30. I don't think Jose Altuve is going to hit that much, but when you look at the guys on there and you look at their numbers, the Astros have a potential to hit a lot of long balls this year, right? A lot. And that's great if you're an Astros fan, because that just means the Astros are going to be brutal on hitters, and they're still going to have a very, very good pitching staff, both in the rotation, starting rotation, and in the bullpen. So all those things add up to a really good season for the Astros. It's, I was talking to my father-in-law the other day, who's a perpetual pessimist. He's a huge baseball fan. I've actually had him on here before, quite a while back, almost 2 years ago. And he knows so much about baseball, and he's so intelligent about it. But he is a eternal pessimist. And I know he listens to this, so I hope he hears this. And, he told me he's predicting the Astros win 86 games. And I just said, listen, if they win 86 games, something went horribly wrong. This is going to be a team that has a very good starting lineup. I mean, right now, just the removal of Maldonado, replacing with Diaz is going to be a big part of that, getting McCormick more time. Hopefully, if Jake Myers can produce like he has in the spring, if Jeremy Pena can just hit a few more home runs, right? And then you look at the starting rotation. Their pitching is going to be good and probably can get better throughout the year because they have guys. They have one guy in the minors in Spencer Arrighetti who could make a move to the big leagues at some point this season. And then you have the potential returns of Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers. Now, I'm not betting anything on the return of Lance McCullers at this point, right? I was reading yesterday when people talking about it saying he's coming along. He hopes to get back maybe for an assignment in July. That would mean that he could pitch in August. That would be great, but I'll believe it when I see it with him. Garcia's a little different. I think he can come back. And I do still think this is going to be a big year for Christian Javier. So, look, they're really good, and their bullpen's going to be really good. And I'm going to talk about that. But so for all the Houston sports pessimists and general sports pessimists like my father-in-law, Alan, I'm here to shed a little hope and light and optimism on your day. Hopefully your week. We'll see. So let's talk a little bit about the 20-man roster. And I'd love to hear about your projections for what you think. You can hit me up on X at Jeff Balke, JEFFBALKE. You can leave comments on YouTube. You can also leave them for at Believe in Astros on Twitter, X, whatever the hell Elon Musk is calling it. I wrote a story this morning that's going to appear in the Houston Press tomorrow, and it's a projection of the 26-man roster. And I've seen a few of these. I know Brian McTaggart came out with one, and Chandler Rome has one of his out. And so I'm going to be doing one this week. I'll do one next week. The truth is the Astros don't have a lot of spots, right? This is a team that is pretty well set, right? And that's kind of unique in baseball. They don't have a great farm system, but the guys they plucked out of the farm system have all been very good. In addition to that, they don't really need to have a great farm system right this second because they have so many positions already filled, right? So even the ones that do make the final few roster spots are going to be pretty low leverage spots, right? So let's talk about them a little bit, and we can go through. I want to go through them a little bit at a time. So for starting position players, the 9 guys: Jose Abreu at first, Jose Altuve at second, Jeremy Pena at shortstop, Alex Bregman at third, Chas McCormick in left, Jake Myers in center, Kyle Tucker in right, Yainer Diaz behind the plate, and Yordan DHing. So this is going to be their lineup, I think, most days. I think this will be their, with a couple of assumptions that I'll talk about. I think this is going to be their lineup, though, for the most part, right? This is going to be the guys that they really want out there on a regular basis. Now, the only drawback to this lineup is you have 2 lefties in lineup, and that's it. So I would not surprise me if you saw Victor Caratini, who I'll talk about here in a minute, get some starts both at DH, at catcher, and maybe even a little bit at first base. I think he's a switch hitter, and I think that's a guy they're going to want in there. But beyond the sort of lack of lefties in the lineup, this is their lineup going forward. This has been a very good lineup. I think it will continue to be a very good lineup. The 2 guys in here who are, I don't want to say newcomers, but they're new to the full-time starting position is Jake Myers and Yainer Diaz. So first, let's talk about Jake Myers. He's been performing really well in spring training. He's retooled his swing a little bit. He's healthy. He looks obviously he is a plus defender in the outfield, and he is their best defensive center fielder. Although if you've watched any highlights from Kennedy Corona, that guy can play some defense, man. He flashes the leather. But Myers is an excellent defender, and I think that's how they're going to primarily deploy him. I think he's going to be hitting 8th or 9th most days. But listen, if Jake Myers comes out and he has a little pop in his bat, if he gets, 12 or 14 home runs, which would be kind of incredible. I don't know what his career numbers are, but if he gets decent home run numbers, if he goes in there, slaps the ball around, pulls a Mauricio Dubon, right? If he just does Mauricio Dubon numbers, so he hit 10 home runs in 2021. He's only hit 10. So he hits 10 home runs this year and then sort of slaps the ball around, gets on base a lot, especially if he's down at the bottom of that lineup where when they flip the lineup over and then now you've got all of a sudden Altuve and Alvarez and Bregman and Tucker behind him. Then Jake Meyers really does add a lot to this team because they had a lot of just moving around last year in center field, a lot of different guys playing center and left. And I think McCormick is a big key to this because McCormick's going to play left when Yordan DHs. When Yordan's in left field, McCormick's probably going to play center most of the time, although we'll certainly see Jake Meyers in there a little bit and Mauricio Dubon. But look, if Meyers hits the ball even decently well, right? Even if he just hits, even if he's in the 250s or something, average-wise, if his on-base percentage can get up to 300, that is going to be a big plus for them, right? From deep in that lineup. And then you look at Yainer. Yainer is immediately an offensive upgrade over Martin Maldonado. And a lot of people would argue he's a defensive upgrade. His defensive numbers were certainly better. His two biggest challenges really are going to be framing, where he wasn't very good, and then in handling pitchers. I think on the former, he's going to improve pretty quickly. I think he's gotten lots of training on that. I think he's spent a lot of time working on that. I think that will improve quickly because he does seem like a pretty solid and savvy catcher. On the working with pitchers, that's going to be a work in progress. I think that's something he's just going to have to learn. He's going to have to work with the pitchers. The pitch comm will help. Obviously, some of the pitchers are talking about calling their own games. That might happen some. So we'll see how that works out. But at the plate, he's immediately better than Martin Maldonado. I mean, if he's even just as good as he was last year, that would be huge for the Astros, right? If he can be a little better, I mean, you're talking about putting a very, very solid. I mean, this is the best hitting catcher the Astros have had in God knows how long, right? So that is immediate upgrade. So when you look at that lineup, you think, okay, there's some immediate upgrades. And I would argue that Jose Abreu has the potential to be better this year because he was injured for the first half of last year. He didn't really come on until the second half. He'll be more comfortable in the organization this year. I think he has a chance to break out and have a decent. Plus, they're going to play him. They're not going to play him necessarily sparingly, but they're going to play him less. You're going to see him get some days off, some days where he'll DH instead of playing first. I think that will make a difference. There are 4 players that will make the bench. 2 are already locked in, and that's Mauricio Dubon and Victor Caratini. Dubon, fresh off his Gold Glove season as the team's utility man. Victor Caratini added in the offseason. So Dubon, we know what he can do. He's going to play middle infield. He's going to play center field. He might occasionally have to play a little bit in left. I mean, if they want to go with their best defensive lineup in the outfield, honestly, it might be Dubon, Meyers, and Tucker, although it's not much fall off with McCormick and left. So he's going to be used a lot for that. I think he's going to do what he's been doing, which is come in and hit the ball around the field, not try to worry too much about power numbers. Just get in there and get on base, which is what he does best. Get on base and play good defense, and also make good faces in the clubhouse because God knows he's the king of that. Victor Caratini is the one that really intrigues me. What a jump in the catching position, just in terms of offense. I won't even bother the defense, although it's certainly a jump in that regard too. Caratini, he's a switch hitter. He plays a little bit of first base. He's a good catcher, very solid defensive catcher. I think this is a guy who I think he might play a little sort of quote unquote second utility, where you see him at first, you see him DHing, you see him catching a little bit, move him around, to give him some options. And it's certainly going to be that way because he's going to be one of the few left-handed bats the Astros have available against right-handers, right? So that's important. That leaves 2 bench spots. Right now, I tend to agree with some of the things I've seen written that the 2 bench spots are likely at this moment John Singleton and Gray Kessinger. I'm going to start with Kessinger because it's a little bit easier. Kessinger, it's not so much that you worry about his bat, but he can play every position on the infield. And when you don't really have a backup third baseman at all, and you have iffy backup first baseman, right? That's going to be a critical component for them because the Astros obviously are going to emphasize defense. Kessinger can run a little bit. He's not a big power hitter or anything, but he's not going to be a massive black hole on offense. Kessinger's a guy that I think, at least to start the season, he's a guy who I think you're going to see in there just simply because of his defensive versatility on the infield. The other guy is Singleton. Now, I had said last week, and I've said it a little bit, that I thought Corey Julks was kind of one of the people to be locked in. I would love for him to be, but as others have pointed out, as good as his offense has been this spring and as solid as he was last year, he is, I don't want to call him a defensive liability, but he's not a great defensive player. He really only plays left field. So his only option is left field and DH. Now you might say, well, Jeff, John Singleton's only defense is first base and DH. And you're right. And I'm not saying I want John Singleton to be the choice, but here's the reality. John Singleton is out of options. So if the Astros decide he is not going to be on the 26-man roster, that means John Singleton will have to be waived. Now he might clear waivers and they might be able to outright him to AAA, especially given the fact that he was basically in the middle of no man's land last year. But I'm not sure the Astros want to do that. The Astros are so deficient in terms of the lefty power bat thing that I think it's very possible they're going to start the season with Singleton to see what he can do. Now, he was not good last year, aside from his 2 home run game. He was not good for the Astros. I don't think he'll be good this year. I would much prefer to see someone like Joey Loperfido in there, who's the young guy who can play center. He can play a little middle infield. He's a lefty bat. He's had some power. He's looked really good in spring training, but he has options. He can go back to the minors and come up later. So I think that's probably where they'll start the season. I don't know that that's where they'll end the season, right? But I think that's probably where they'll start it, especially given the fact that they play 21 of their first 22 days. They have games. So they're going to be looking for guys that can spot guys defensively and stuff like that, even early in the season. And I think that's why you see Kessinger. And I think they're concerned about the lefty at bats. And so that's why Singleton. Again, not my first choice. To be honest with you, I'd want Loperfido and Julks, but I do understand the concerns over the defensive problems that presents for you, particularly on the infield. So and Singleton can play a little first. Now you've got a guy in Kessinger who can play short and third, second, and you've got a guy in Singleton who can play first. I get it. I don't really care about it. I don't really like it. It's not my choice, but I do understand the logic behind it. Okay, starting rotation. So there's going to be 5 guys in the starting rotation. I am only listing Justin Verlander is not listed because he's going to miss the first couple weeks of the season. So I'm not including him in that number. I'm just going to include 5 guys, and that's Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Hunter Brown, Jose Urquidy, and JP France, probably in that order. I do think because they do have 21 days and 21 games in 22 days, I do think that they will probably do a 6-man rotation, at least for the first month of the season. And that would mean you'd get a start from Ronel Blanco or Brandon Bielak. It also does open the outside possibility that instead of using them as starters, you might keep Spencer Arrighetti on your roster just for those first couple of weeks. Give him a spot start. Arrighetti's looked real good in spring training. I think he's going to be a very good pitcher. I think he will be up this season at some point. But I think this might be his chance to get an actual start, get his feet wet in the big leagues, just simply because Verlander's going to be out. When Verlander returns, and assuming JP France is healthy and able to go in his first start, then at that point you might have to send Arrighetti back down because they're not going to throw him out of the bullpen. They need to keep him stretched out like a starter. That's what he is. Whereas Blanco and a guy like Brandon Bielak, they can do spot starts and they can go back to the bullpen, kind of go back and forth. That's sort of the skill set they have. And so I think that makes a difference. But for now, we've got 5 guys in the starting rotation. And I think they will carry an extra guy in the bullpen. I think they'll carry 8 in the bullpen. Now, keep in mind, their 26-man rotation for the first 2 games is actually a 25-man rotation because Brian Abreu is suspended from last year's weirdness in the postseason. So with Brian Abreu out, they still have to. He is still on their roster. He's still going to be on their 26-man, which means they'll just be a man down for a couple of games. But if you look at the bullpen and you say, okay, they're going to keep 8 in the bullpen, like I said, until Justin Verlander returns, and then we'll see. But that's why there's a potential for Eric Getty in there, although I'm not sure that's the case. Your locks are Josh Hader, Ryan Presley, Brian Abreu, Rafael Montero. I think Ronel Blanco and Brandon Bielak are also locks. Again, the Ronel Blanco I think is going to be good this year. I think he has a real potential to be a leverage middle reliever, bridge guy, with as an occasional piggyback starter because of his ability to kind of go back and forth. Bielak, I think he has that same kind of thing about being a piggyback. And so that's why I think he'll be on early in the season. But I think Bielak and Blanco both will have to pitch well to stay in this bullpen. I think the Astros are going to be aggressive about the bullpen this year. They already have what could arguably the 3-2-1 best final 3 outs of the game, final 3 innings of the game. So you want to make sure that is supported. And I think they're going to be aggressive. If they feel like their bullpen is even a little bit deficient, I think they're going to look for guys, come the trading deadline, or if they have injuries, obviously. That leaves 2 more spots if you're going 8. Right now, for me, it's Seth Martinez and Bennett Sousa. Now, Sousa probably will be the guy, unless it's Arrighetti, to start the season because of Verlander's spot, right? I think Martinez is almost as close to a lock as you can be. He's got big league experience. He had a couple of streaks with the Astros where he was very good. He's been very good this spring training. Bennett Sousa is he's a lefty. The Astros, he's pitched pretty well for them, at different times. And he's a lefty, something that the Astros would consider a luxury in the bullpen for 2 reasons. 1, they have Josh Hader, who's a lefty, and 2, they just don't really normally have lefties in the bullpen. It hasn't been really part of who they are as a ball club over the last few years. They prefer to have the best pitchers, left or right, which I think is the right move. But if you do a guy that's a decent pitcher and he's a lefty, why not? But I think if Sousa makes the team, I think he's probably the guy that makes it because Verlander's on IL. Otherwise, it might be Arrighetti, and then Sousa would be out. But right now, my prediction is they bring Sousa because he can pitch out of the bullpen, and Arrighetti is just not going to be a bullpen guy. He's just going to strictly be a starter. Look, if Dylan Coleman could find the strike zone, he'd be a reliever. But the guy he walks too many people, man. He has such control issues, which has sort of plagued him. The Astros love his stuff, as they say. But man, you've got to throw strikes, and he hasn't been able to do that. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze right now. If you excuse me, my allergies are like on 1,000. I don't know who else's car is blanketed in yellow dust, but I feel like my face is blanketed in yellow dust at all times. So pardon my wheezy allergies. Anyway, I do think that the Astros roster is mostly set. I think it's going to be these guys that are on the outside, the fringe sort of players. That's going to be the difference. And we'll see. We've got a couple more weeks left of spring training. Injuries can also crop up, although you hope that's not the case. But right now, I think that's kind of where we're at. I think the biggest question mark is going to be the 2 bench guys, Kessinger and Singleton. Right now, that's totally in flux. But I think those are the most likely given the spot where we're at right now as we close in on opening day. Okay, I am promising you this. Okay, so I've been operating without a co-host for the past few weeks, as you all know. But it does appear that now I will be having, if not a full-time, a certainly regular co-host in Mike Stanton, which I think is fantastic. I've had Mike Stanton on the show before. He's a great guy, obviously boatloads of knowledge about baseball. It'll be interesting to have a pitching perspective, and just a really all-around good dude, right? And so he and I have chatted about it. It looks like next week we'll probably do our first episode together, and hopefully that's what it'll stay through the season. So I think it's going to be fun, and we are going to be efforting. I will say this year, I am going to be much more aggressive about having guests on the show. I really like having them. It takes some of the work off me because, listen, I can talk. Everybody who's watched this should know that. All my friends I've known for years, my wife, they all understand. Jeff has the ability to talk when he needs to. But it's better for everybody if Jeff guides the conversation rather than dominates it. And so I'm going to be very aggressive this year about bringing in guests. I've had a couple over the last few weeks, other podcasters. I'm looking at getting some former players, some former coaches, some other media members. I really would love to get some guys on from the other AL West teams, broadcasters, things like that. So I'm going to be working on that. I've asked Mike to help me with that. I'm sure he will do that. I think I'm really looking forward to having someone to shoulder the load and really provide great insight for you guys. I love baseball. I love sports. I've written about it for quite a few years now, but my knowledge is limited, man. I didn't play the game. I haven't played since high school. And even then, so to me, the more knowledge I can get from people around me, the better, and certainly the better for you. So that's going to be the plan. So I'll have more sort of on that Friday when I do my 5-Minute Friday, and I'll post some information on X as going forward as well, just to confirm how everything's going. If you have any questions, obviously, I really appreciate seeing them, especially about the 26-man roster. How do you guys feel about it? I'm curious. Listen. As I said, I'm not sold on any of it, but I think that's where we're at. So before next week and before Friday, send me your questions, post them on YouTube or send them to me through X. There will be a fresh pod next week brought to you by BetOnline. Hopefully Mike will join me. You can obviously catch me on Fridays doing my 5-Minute Friday update on YouTube. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher. We also obviously post every podcast to YouTube as well. The 5-Minute Fridays are not on audio. They're strictly on YouTube at this point. But so you can catch those on there. Give me a follow on X. X. I hate saying X. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. Like, follow me on X. It's like, follow me on X and Instagram at Believe in Astros, BLEAV in Astros, or me personally at Jeff Balke. I'm all over social media. And that's where I've always gone with just my name. I've never really had a moniker, not since the many, many, many years ago when I once had one. Not anymore, though. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Sign up to get alerts on the podcast as well. And thanks to everybody who's continues to listen and continues to leave comments and leave reviews. It's just great hearing from all of you all over not just Houston, but Texas, the country, and yay, the world. So keep that coming. Thanks again. I will talk to you again on Friday. And until then, as always, go Astros.